Hello, 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 and welcome back to Spin Cycle Live. I'm your host, Nathan Hale, and today we have quite the show for you. It's so much to cover, not enough to do it, so I just want to get right into it. But before, I hope you all are having a great Wednesday. I know that I am. It has been stormy here where I am at today, but we are getting right into it. So, once again, before we begin, shows come out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Reruns every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 8 p.m. on YouTube, Rumble, X, all the platforms they're out there. Make sure you're following me on X at Homo18 if you're not already. Share this show with friends. Let people know how great it is. And we'll be back in our regular studio soon enough. Bear with me as we move through these times. Like I said, I'm on vacation, but I still have to bring you these great episodes because I'm a loudmouth. I gotta get my opinions out there. There's a lot going on in the world right now. June's been a busy month so far. So let's get right into the busyness right away. So our first story of the week comes from The Independent. So this is kind of a little bit more of an uplifting story. I just thought it was interesting. So new plastic that dissolves in seawater raises hope for tackling ocean pollution. Japanese researchers say new material can dissolve completely in saltwater or moist soil without leaving behind harmful microplastics. Scientists in Japan have developed a new type of plastic that dissolves quickly in seawater, offering a potential breakthrough in the fight against ocean pollution. The material created by researchers at the University of Tokyo is being described as the fastest degrading plastic of any kind. The researchers say it can vanish within hours in salt water or soil without leaving behind harmful microplastics. Plastic pollution has emerged as a major health hazard, with microplastics now found in human organs and even brain and bloodstream. The UN has warned that plastic waste entering the oceans could triple by 2040 unless urgent action is taken. While recycling rates have remained dismally low, especially for single-use plastics, scientists and innovators are racing to develop alternative materials that break down more easily or bypass the problem altogether. Scientists say the material maintains the strength of traditional petroleum-based plastic, but when exposed to salt, breaks down into its original components, which are then digested by naturally occurring bacteria. So I think this is really interesting. I love this idea. Hopefully we can integrate this into single-use plastic straws. We don't have to use those awful paper straws anymore when we go to the beach. So, anything that I think is biodegradable or more green or just a better way of taking care of our planet, I think is great. I don't get on the same bandwagon as a lot of the climate nuts out there do, but I still do recognize the need for making sure that we take care of our planet and that, our pollution stays under control. There are a lot of issues out there that have to do with our environment right now that are not just solely, the world is either warming or cooling, right? We have a lot of pollution just around the world in general. And any way that we can get around all that, I think is great. I'd be more than happy to pay more money for a product that is made using this type of plastic. Someday when I own a home, I would love to have a compost pit in my backyard that I can put a lot of our waste into, and things that are compostable, I'd be a lot more likely to buy because of it. So that's just my perspective. If you don't care, that's all good. I'm not going to force it down your throat or anything, but I think this is cool. And I hope we see this make its way into other types of products where it's applicable. All right, let's move on to our next story. This comes from the Washington Times. So Connecticut town schools are investigated for transgender athlete policies. So first off, here is a photograph of the Connecticut school in question here. This is Bloomfield School. Just take a look at that and just let me know right off the bat, who are not the women in this photograph? Because I see a woman here, I see a woman here, I see a woman. Oh, that's not a woman. That also ain't a woman. I can tell. They stand out right away, and not just because they're black. You can tell. And so, before I even read the story, by the way, these two athletes, according to the description of this photo, came in first and second place to all the other women. So, it was the two trans athletes first, and then the women all underneath them. Just saying. Also, yeah. So there you go. So Connecticut, a school system in Connecticut that's at the center of an ongoing legal fight over allowing transgender student athletes to participate in competitive girls' sports is being investigated by the Trump administration, the U.S. Department of Education confirmed Tuesday, adding a new flashpoint in the national debate over trans girls' participation in youth sports. James Demetrius, the mayor of Cornwall in Connecticut, said the town's school system could lose nearly $1 million in federal special education funding if the department determines it's in violation of Title IX, the federal civil right law that forbids discrimination based on sex in education programs or activities that receive federal assistance. The mayor, a Democrat, said Monday the school district would be ineligible for the state's athletic conference if it didn't allow student athletes to compete on sex-segregated sports teams consistent with their gender identity. He said the district is currently following, quote, all applicable state and federal laws as well as the rules for the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference, the governing body for secondary school athletics in the state. In an interview on Tuesday, Mr. Demetrius said Cornwall currently has, quote, no gender diverse high school CIAC athletes. Quote, we don't know why Cornwall was targeted for this action, Mr. Demetrius said in a statement on Facebook. He said the investigation also includes restroom and locker room usage. CIAC's policy on allowing transgender girls to compete in girls' high school sports was first challenged in 2020 by 4 runners who said they were unfairly forced to race against transgender sprinters from Cornwall and against Bloomfield. CIAC argued its policy is designed to comply with a state law that requires all high school students be treated according to their gender identity. It has also been said the policy is in accordance with Title IX. While a federal appeals court in 2022 dismissed the plaintiff's challenge to CIAC's policy, saying they lacked standing and had not been deprived of, quote, a chance to be champions, the suit was later revived in 2023 and is currently pending. It could be ready for trial in 2026. The head of the U.S. Education Department's Office for Civil Rights, Craig Traynor, said in a statement that the investigation was looking at whether Cornwall's policies were, quote, depriving girls and young women of equal athletic opportunities. U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon added that, quote, this administration will fight on every front to protect women and girls' sports. You know, this is quite an interesting story. So, what I'm understanding the mayor is saying is, in Connecticut, if they do not allow trans athletes to compete in the gender of their choice, so if you're a man, you are allowed to compete in the women's categories, right? You can do that in Connecticut, right? What I'm understanding he's saying is that if they don't allow that to happen, meaning that they make the trans athletes play in their sex assigned at birth sport, they will lose federal funding. If they don't allow, see, this is also confusing. It all gets so confusing. Okay, so if you in Connecticut, let's break it down. If you're in Connecticut, all right, and you are a biological male that identifies as female, Connecticut says you are allowed to play in the women's sport, even though you're biologically male. Okay. And this seems like this big sports championship says that you have to allow this, meaning you have to allow men in women's sports in Connecticut high schools to compete in this statewide championship. And if you don't, you're not allowed to compete. Okay. But on the flip side, okay, the federal government is saying, hey, you don't get money if you allow this to happen. So the school is going to have to make a choice and say, hey, do we take the money from the federal government and not allow these trans athletes in sports? Or Do we allow the trans athletes in the women's sports, but not take the federal money, right? So it's a catch-22. So either way, they lose something. So um, I think this is great. This is the only way that change can be made is with money, in my opinion, especially when it comes to a lot of these government policies that happen in the states. Because the fact of the matter is, the Fed can only go so far in regulating what a state can do and allow in their school systems. But they can certainly withhold money. They can do that. So I'm a big fan of this. Men should not be competing in women's sports. I'm a big fan of states making a all genders sports league and allow anyone to play in it. And even if you are not, if you don't identify with a different gender, allow anyone to play in it. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a woman, you should be allowed to compete against people based on your merit, right? And competing against people fairly who don't have a innate biological advantage ahead of you. And that's just the truth of all of this, is trans athletes have an innate biological advantage over female athletes. And I don't even want to hear anything about the athletes who take hormone suppressors or take estrogen, set testosterone, whatever that is. I don't care. You have an innate biological difference, and you should not be competing against women no matter what you're taking. You should be in your own league, or you should be with all the men. It's just how I feel about it. So if you feel differently, let me know. Tweet at me. But yeah, that's how I feel about that. All right, let's move on. So this comes from Fox Business. So a federal judge has halted Florida's social media ban for kids. A federal judge has granted a preliminary injunction against Florida's HB3, a law regarding youth and social media accounts. Chief U.S. District Judge Mark Walker in Tallahassee said in court documents obtained by Fox Business that the law is in violation of the First Amendment protections on free speech. Walker's ruling on Tuesday sides with trade groups NetChoice and Computer and Communications Industry Association, putting HB3 on hold until the litigation is resolved. Quote, today's ruling is yet another affirmation that the government cannot control or censor online speech. Like all Americans, Floridians have the right to access lawful speech without the government controlling what they say, share, or see online. Chris Marchese, NetChoice Director of Litigation, said in a statement. Quote, lawmakers should focus on real constitutional alternatives that respect both family autonomy and free speech, he continued. Jeremy Redfern, a spokesman for Republican Florida Attorney General James Youthmeyer, whose office is defining the law, said in a statement obtained by Reuters that the platforms do not have a constitutional right to addict kids to their products. Youthmeyer's office plans to appeal it to the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. So HB3 requires social media platforms to bar users under the age of 14 and requires users under 16 to get parental consent before opening an account. It was supposed to go into effect January 1st, but was put on hold due to litigation. In Tuesday's ruling, Walker said he appreciated that parents are concerned about their children's social media use, but that other unchallenged provisions of the law offered them recourse. The industry groups did not address some parts of the law that directed social media companies to delete youth accounts at parental request. Yeah, so, this is a tough one for me. On the one hand, I knew this would be challenged in the courts because of the First Amendment. But, on the counter end of it, kids really shouldn't be on social media, in my opinion. We see that social media degrades things like mental health. We see things that it's just not good for kids to be exposed to social media in the ways they are right now. And something needs to be done about it. Now, this might have been too much too soon, but something needed to be done. And I think the argument over the First Amendment is really an argument of, do minors have a First Amendment privilege to be able to say what they want on the internet? Or does the state have the authority to say, no, You can't have a social media account if you're a kid in our state. Just a fact of the matter, right? How many accounts this was going to stop uh, kids from having? That's in, who knows really. But do you have a First Amendment right as a kid? I don't think you do, frankly. In my opinion, I don't think you do. When it comes down to it, parents get to say what their kids can and cannot do. Parents have the autonomy to say, no, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to say that, right? We don't see lawsuits happening from kids saying, hey, my mom said I can't use swear words. That's an infringement on my First Amendment right? Or well, I guess that wouldn't necessarily be a First Amendment case. I'm just trying to think here. Gosh, I mean, I'm sure there's examples out there that you could give um, of when government steps over necessarily a child's First Amendment rights. I mean, porn as an example, right? You, as a minor, you're not legally allowed to watch porn in the United States, right? It has to be 18 and plus. There's lots that have to do with that. You know, is there an argument there that as a child your First Amendment rights are being violated because you can't express yourself on the internet, or you can't post pictures of your naked body on the internet as a child, right? That's your free expression on the internet, right? So I don't know. I'm not trying to lump that in together because I recognize there's two very different things. But I'm just saying, right? There's an argument to be had of how much authority or how much of a First Amendment right do children have in the United States when it really comes down to it. And I'm somewhat a fan of this law. The more that I've heard about it, the more I've thought about it, the more I've kind of come around to it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes going forward. And we've seen in the past when Florida has made kind of controversial lawsuits or controversial laws, they've usually come out on top with them. So that's all I gotta say about that one. All right, let's go and move on to a New York Post story. All right, so from the New York Post, where's the title of this? So Citibank drops gun policy after Trump slammed banks for discriminating against conservatives. So Citigroup said Tuesday it was rolling back a 2018 policy that placed restrictions on providing banking services to retail clients selling firearms, citing recent regulatory developments. Since the Trump administration office in January, U.S. banks and regulators have come under scrutiny from lawmakers over allegations of denying services to certain industries or political groups. The banking industry has fiercely resisted the accusations, arguing that outdated and oblique rules make it difficult for them to sometimes provide services or explain why they cannot. Quote, we appreciate the concerns that are being raised regarding fair access to banking services, and we are following regulatory developments, recent executive orders, and federal legislation that impact this area. The U.S. banking giant's head of enterprise services and public affairs, Edward Schuyler, said in a blog post. Citi added it will update its employee code of conduct and consumer-facing global financial access policy to clearly state it does not discriminate on the basis of political affiliation. The bank said it will no longer have a specific policy related to firearms. Citi added in U.S. commercial firearms policy was implemented in 2018 and pertained to the sale of firearms by its retail clients and partners. The move comes after Republican-led states pushed legislation to discourage perceived discrimination by banks, and the patchwork of varying laws meant to ensure banks lend fairly has led to the frustration in the banking industry. So, if you don't remember what happened, I believe that it was very controversial. Citi said it was going to be tracking and flagging people who made gun purchases or sold guns using credit cards. It got a lot of conservatives very upset because they're like, hey, man, like I should be able to use my credit card for stuff if I want to or not. You shouldn't have any knowledge that I bought a gun or sold a gun, whatever that may be. So I think that it's great that Citibank is overturning this. I'm very skeptical of Citibank. Citibank has had a lot of data leaks and data lossage over the years. I still would not open an account with Citibank myself. That's just my opinion. I'm weary of them. But them saying that they're no longer doing this and having pressure from the Trump administration, I think is great. The world is shining again, right? Freedom is reigning, and I think this is great, good news. And no bank should have the authority to. Oh, I think the other thing was they were threatening to potentially turn off people's cards if they noticed they were susceptible to going and buying a gun and doing nefarious acts with it or something, right? So, which is totally ridiculous, right? So, anyways, let's go and move on to our last story, which is about the Trump budget. So, this from AP News. So, the Trump tax bill will add $2.4 trillion to the deficit and leave 10.9 million more uninsured, CBO says. President Donald Trump's big bill making its way through Congress will cut taxes by $3.75 trillion, but also increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion over the next decade, according to an analysis released Wednesday by the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, CBO. The CBO also estimates an increase of 10.9 million people without insurance under the bill by 2034, including 1.4 million who are in the United States without legal status in state-funded programs. The package would reduce federal outlays or spending by nearly 1.3 trillion over the period, the budget office said. So Trump pushing Congress to act. The analysis comes at a crucial moment in the legislative process as Trump is pushing Congress to have a final product on his desk to sign into law by the 4th of July. The work of the CBO, which for decades has served as the official scorekeeper of legislation in Congress, will be weighed by lawmakers and others seeking to understand the budgetary impacts of the sprawling 1,000-page plus package. Ahead of the CBO's release, the White House and Republican leaders criticized the budget office in the primitive campaign design to sow doubt in its findings. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the CBO has been, quote, historically wrong, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune said the CBO was flat wrong because it underestimated the potential revenue growth from Trump's first round of tax breaks in 2017. The CBO last year said receipts were 1.5 trillion or 5.6% greater than predicted, in large part because of the burst of high inflation during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021. White House Budget Director Russ Voigt said when you adjust for current policy, which meant not counting some 4.5 trillion in existing tax breaks that are simply being extended for the next decade, the overall package actually doesn't pile onto the deficit. He argued the spending cuts alone, in fact, help reduce deficits by 1.4 trillion over the decade. Leavitt also suggested that the CBO's employees are biased, even though certain budget office workers face strict ethical rules, including restrictions on campaign donations and political activity to ensure objectivity and impartiality. All told, the package seeks to extend the individual income tax breaks that have been approved in 2017, but will expire in December if Congress fails to act, while adding new ones, including no tax on tips. It also includes a massive buildup of $350 billion for border security, deportation, and national security. To help cover the lost revenue, Republicans want to slash some federal spending. They propose phasing out green energy tax breaks put in place during Democrat Joe Biden's presidency. New work requirements for adults up to age 65 on Medicare and SNAP would begin December 2026 and are expected to result in less spending on those programs. Republicans argue their proposals are intended to make Medicare and other programs stronger by rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. They want the federal funding to go to those who most need health care and other services, often citing women and children. The package will also provide a $4 trillion increase to the national debt limit, which is now at $36 trillion, to allow more borrowing. The Treasury Department projects the debt limit will need to be raised this summer to pay the nation's already accrued bills. So with all things, especially when it comes to these, quote unquote nonpartisan offices and departments and stuff that are looking at spending, or just anything in general, I think it's usually somewhere in between of where the actual answer is. So, will 10.9 million people be uninsured because of this bill? I'm not sure about that. But will it raise the debt ceiling? Absolutely. That's literally in the bill. Raising the debt ceiling is a part of it. So, I'm not in favor of that at all. I think that we need to have some fiscal responsibility and get our spending under control and figure out where more cuts need to come from. So, I'm not in favor of lowering people's taxes just to then go and borrow more money and up our national debt even more, right? So it's just a matter of principle for me. It depends on how you feel about it. I think there's great things in the bill, like the no tax on tips. That's a great thing. That should have been, we should have had that a long time ago. But I'm not a favor of raising the debt limit at all, at all, at all. And the fact that this bill seeks to do this means that I have to be somewhat against it. There's good things and bad things. I want to bring back single issue legislation back to Congress where they pass things one bill at a time, right? Or some larger things all together, right? The debt ceiling should be its own bill because the spending bill altogether is great, right? But I think a lot of Republicans would vote against raising the debt ceiling, but they don't want to vote against the rest of the spending bill. Because then they're going to be looked at as the enemy, right? And that's how we've gotten a lot of this ridiculous legislation gone through, because they pack in the bad stuff a whole bunch of good things, like no tax on tips, for example. So that's my concern with all of that. I think that the CBO is right to be concerned about this. I think that honestly, a lot of I don't give the Democrats any credit because they raise the debt ceiling too. But I think the people who are concerned with this debt bill, or who are concerned about the spending bill, have good reasoning to be concerned about it. And I encourage people to go and actually listen to what they're saying and think about if it's worth it to be raising national debt or not. Think about future generations and the fact that people like me, I'm 21. People my age are going to have to deal with our national debt at some point. At some point, it's going to come to bite us in the ass. It just is. That's a fact of the matter. It's going to come and get us. And I'm not in government right now. There's not a lot of young people in government right now, especially in the Republican Party. So I feel like they're a little bit less concerned with the debt ceiling because they know that they're not going to be around for that much longer, frankly. And I know it's a little bit morbid to say, but it's the truth. But anyways, with that is the end of today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. We'll be back here on Friday with yet another episode for you all. I appreciate you all listening, interacting with me on X, and letting me know how great the show is. Make sure you're sharing it with friends and family. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumble. That's where it really helps us out. And with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you back here on Friday. If you missed the show, by the way, it'll be rerunning again tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. But with that, I've been Nathan Hale. This has been Spin Cycle Live. Peace out.